It took us all of 2 weeks of this college football season for a coach to find his way on the hot seat. It's Billy Napier at Florida. He's on a scalding hot seat once again after his Gators lost inside the swamp to in-state opponent South Florida. We will discuss Billy Napier's job status today on SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. Good lineup of games this weekend. We'll get to that a little bit later on the pod, but we have to start today with the situation in Gainesville, Florida, John. And Billy Napier, boy, he got himself a little bit of distance from the hot seat with the way he finished last season, but all that goodwill he built up with that finish at the end of last year and, building some off-season optimism. Well, he squandered all of that, gave it all back and then some by losing in pretty ugly fashion to South Florida. John, I know you've kind of already had your opinion made on Billy Napier for a while now, but what does this latest development do for the outlook at Florida?
You know me, I love telling you, I told you so.
Yeah.
He didn't build up any goodwill with me during that late season surge. It was impressive, and Florida certainly finished stronger than it started. I just don't think he's up for this job. I didn't think he should have ever been hired, and the record backs me up. I think now it's just a matter of how much money does Florida want to spend to get rid of him. But I don't see how that it has any choice. Florida's schedule is just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's got many more challenging games in the next couple of months and what it encountered Saturday. Losing in the swamp, though, it's really a bad look. And right now, when you look at Florida and you look at the rest, forget the SEC, just look at the state of Florida. Where are the Gators ranked? Well, they're not Miami or South Florida or Florida State. I haven't seen enough of Central Florida to assess a potential matchup with them and Florida. But right now, I would say Florida's either the fourth or fifth best team in the state. Am I missing anybody?
Florida Atlantic, but I don't figure you're probably an expert on the Owls.
No, and never will be.
Yeah, it was interesting because after the game, coaches say what they're going to say, right? But Billy Napier called it an uncharacteristic performance from Florida. And it's like, no, it wasn't. It had all of the characteristics of a Billy Napier loss, which we've now seen 20 of them throughout his 3+ seasons at Florida. So we've got a lot of film on tape now of what a Florida loss looks like under Billy Napier. It has a lot of penalties, usually undisciplined play, usually a special teams gaffe mixed in there. It had one of those in this game. Florida had 11 penalties against South Florida. Some curious clock management, had some of that. And then as a cherry on top, we had a Florida man hawking a loogie into a bull's face with the game hanging in the balance. Now, that was a little bit of a wrinkle. We haven't seen anybody hawk a loogie on the opponent before this one. But other than that, this had all the hallmarks of a Billy Napier defeat. Video emerged after the game of fans exiting the stadium chanting "Fire Billy, Fire Billy." I mean, I feel like the die is cast here. And frankly, John, I think it's a bit of a misnomer at this point to say Billy Napier is on the hot seat, because the way I look at it, he's just keeping the seat warm at this point for whoever is going to replace him. Like the ship has sailed, especially when you look at that schedule. 4 straight games coming against ranked opponents this weekend at Tiger Stadium against LSU. I mean, I think it's all over except the writing of the buyout check.
There is no seat. I imagine Billy Napier just sitting alone in a room on the floor. No furniture, no paintings on the wall, just nothing. And you're right.
Those have already been boxed up by the maintenance crew there in Gainesville.
They're on a truck going somewhere, maybe back to Lafayette, Louisiana. I thought that defeat was so Napier-like. You could have. We see made in China all the time. That was made in Napier land. I do agree with you. The spitting incident was kind of a bit much. Previously, even critics of Billy Napier might have said, well, at least his players don't spit on opponents. Now you can't say that.
It's John. I'm working on a USF column for this week for USA Today. The Bulls have established themselves as sort of an early front runner for that Group of 5 playoff bid, and I was talking to a few South Florida players as I was working on my column, and South Florida's veteran offensive lineman Cole Best had this to say about the game. He said, quote, "You really break that game down. It really came down to one team was more disciplined than the other." He went on to say, quote, "Watching the tape, it should have never been as close as it was if we would have seized on our opportunities," end quote. And I don't really think he was going out of his way to do this, but it was really like just kind of rubbing salt into the reality of in Gainesville there, basically saying, yeah, when you look back at it, they were the more disciplined team and could have won by more points than what they did. It was really just an unflinching assessment of the reality at Florida right now. And the other thing, John, is when you spin it back to a year ago, both you and I thought Florida should have moved on from Billy Napier at that time, but Florida had an interim president who had been the president when Billy Napier was hired. There was kind of this question of what are they going to do about Scott Strickland, the AD? Does he get another chance to hire a new coach? And I feel like some of those things a year later now have settled. Scott Strickland got a contract extension within the last week, so Florida has made its decision. Scott Strickland is going to remain their AD. So, whether Gator fans like this or not, he's going to get another chance when the day eventually comes to hire a coach. So that has been settled. Florida has installed a new interim president there. I mean, at some point, I think they're eventually going to get a real president. But in any event, they've moved on from the interim president who had been the president when Billy Napier was hired. Point being, I think the university leadership has settled a little bit that, that may have delayed the process a year ago. And you and I thought that shouldn't have delayed the process, but that could have influenced the thinking there. That dust has settled. And at this point, the buyout's big, but it's stomachable, in that $20 million range. That's the cost of doing business at this point. So he's getting not enough protection, insufficient protection from the buyout. He has no help from the schedule. I mean, that thing is tailor-made to get him fired before Columbus Day. And then, point 3, I think the university leadership is settled enough that they can make this decision and fire up the coaching search machine within the next few weeks. I mean, as you look at this, John, I said Columbus Day. That's October 13th. Is Billy Napier still the coach at Florida by then?
If Jeremy Foley were the AD, he wouldn't be. I don't think he will be, even in this environment, because when you look at that, when you look at Florida's schedule, it's hard to find wins. South Florida was a game I marked in the win column for Florida. I did think it was a great bet taking South Florida and all those points, but that was a game Florida really had to win. I mean, now when you look at it, I don't give it a spitter's chance of making a bowl game.
Well said. Yeah, let's just lay it out here. Here is the upcoming schedule for Florida. It is at LSU this week. Then it goes to Miami, which has looked strong so far. Then it's at home against Texas, although as we've seen throughout the Billy Napier era, the magic and mystique of the swamp has reduced since Napier's been in town, and Texas being the number 1 team probably rolling in there. And then it's on the road at Texas A&M. So 3 out of the next 4 on the road. The one home game is against Texas. I mentioned they'd be number 1. No, they won't be number 1. But preseason number 1. My point there, John. Sure. But three of the next 4 on the road, and the other one is against Texas. I mean, conceivably, Florida could lose all 4 of those.
Yeah, I actually think the Florida team and its coaching staff probably welcomes road games at this point because the crowd's turning against it. Mm-hmm. It's turning against the Gators. Florida fans are maybe a little bit more front runners than the majority of SEC programs, I think.
Yeah,
That's
I think so.
proven
I
it.
mean, it is a
Yeah.
great fan base in the best of times, even in the mediocre times. It can be a good fan base, but they can pull out of town whenever whenever they're out on a coach, and I think they're out on this coach.
Yeah, and I think the main topic of discussion with Florida football amongst its fan base won't be can Billy and his boys mount a comeback. It will be who's next. And that's
Hmm.
uh and looking backward instead of forward, looking backward, I still think Florida could have avoided the Napier era if it would have had its NIL house in order when Dan Mullen was the coach.
Hmm.
Admittedly, he wasn't a great recruiter at Florida. Did okay at Mississippi State, but you're looking for different kinds of prospects at Florida. He didn't deliver in that area, but still, if it would have had its NIL uh, house in place in order, I just think it would have had a. I think Mullen is a better coach than Billy Napier. I don't
Oh,
see how
yeah.
anybody could argue that. Who would you want to have on your sideline on game day? You look at Tennessee. Josh Heupel didn't have a great reputation as a recruiter. He had one previous head coaching stint at UCF. But everybody knew he was a good coach, a really good offensive coach. Tennessee was ready to roll with NIL, and that's paid off, that combination. So I think this all could have been avoided, but I guess easy for me to say in hindsight.
Yeah, and Dan Mullen is now 3-0 at UNLV, and they just beat UCLA for whatever that's worth. Not worth much, but at least they didn't lose to UCLA. So yeah, I mean, that would be no case at all, right? If you're going to prosecute the case of who's the better coach on game day, Dan Mullen or Billy Napier, and you said who's signing up to be the defense there, the barrister for Billy Napier, I don't think anybody's stepping forward for that one. They say, do we even need to prosecute this case? No, render a verdict post haste. It's game over. But when we were coming into the season, John, we had our hot seat list, and we both had Billy Napier pretty high up on our list. I don't think either one of us bought the narrative that he wasn't on the hot seat anymore. No, he avoided a firing last year, but he didn't suddenly move 4 zip codes away from the hot seat. But he's on the hottest seat in the SEC, I think, right now, given recent affairs. And Brent Venables turned down the temperature some, I thought, with good performance from Oklahoma and beating Michigan in a convincing victory. So let's reset the table of the SEC hot seat, John. And I'm going to put it to you this way. Who's going to be the first coach fired in the SEC? Because I think we both believe there could be multiple coaches fired this year. Who will be the first coach fired? And would you take Billy Napier to be the first coach fired versus the field? If I'm saying you get to have Billy as the first coach fired and I get everybody else, would you take still Billy versus the field to be the first coach fired?
Unless off-season improprieties pop up, and they sometimes do in the SEC, gosh, at this point, I'd have to take Napier.
Against the
Rather,
field, I can have
I,
Sam Pittman, Brent Venables, all those others. Because Hugh Freeze and Brent Venables have turned down the heat so far, and Pittman's 2-0, hasn't played a great opponent yet. They now have Ole Miss, Memphis, Notre Dame, Tennessee, Texas A&M. It's going to start getting pretty real here for Arkansas and Pittman, but it's already pretty hot, very hot around Billy Napier. So you would take Billy to be the first fired and say, "Go ahead, Blake, you get the field."
yeah, I guess my next leading candidate would be Mark Stoops at Kentucky. I had an enjoyable conversation with a Kentucky fan at lunch today, who, by the way, he's joined our podcast crowd.
No, welcome in.
Yeah, you gotta, even though we're in the middle of the season's just getting cranked up, you still gotta recruit. And I went out and recruited a listener there. Cody's his name, very knowledgeable fan. He questions if
As Cody would tell us, though, the buyout for Stoops is. I mean, do you really think Kentucky's going to be serious enough about its football program to shell out over $30 million to fire Mark Stoops?
that was his point.
Yeah.
And it's a good point. How's Kentucky spending its NIL money? Why in the world would it invest in the football program and hope to go make a bowl game as opposed to let's win a national championship in basketball. It's got the tradition, it's got the passionate fan base, and it's got enough money to buy some of the best players. So, and I think fans are happy with Mark Pope now as Kentucky's basketball coach. So just look at it strictly from an investment point. What if you got $5 million lying around? How do you want to spend it? I mean, how many people would say, "Well, you know what? Let's go buy Mark Stoops at quarterback." Huh? No.
No, they're not doing that.
No.
I don't know if they're handing over $30+ million to fire him either. We'll see how bad it gets. But I think I'm with you. It's a tough call because it is tempting to take the field because things can get hot in a hurry in the SEC. I mean, you're not on the hot seat one day and all it takes is, losing to a group of 5 school and then you are. But I think I would take Billy Napier versus the field to be the first coach fired because he doesn't have a Mark Stoops level buyout. It's big, but it's not Mark Stoops level big. He's already got the embarrassing loss to South Florida, which may well be a playoff team. I'm not really criticizing South Florida, but you still can't lose inside the swamp to a group of 5 school. You can't live that down, particularly when you're a 500 coach anyway. And you just pair that with the upcoming schedule. I think I would take Billy Napier to be the first coach fired. If he loses to LSU and Miami, both road games, sinks to 1-3, I don't know if he even sees that home game against Texas at that point. I mean, they let it play out last season, and he rallied his way back. They finished 8-5, but I don't. You can't play the same song and dance over and over, right? I mean, if it sinks to 1-3, Billy Napier maybe has coached his last game in the swamp.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's calling him Mr. November. They just don't care that much, and I think we could have even in a best case scenario for Napier, and he finished strong again. As you said, Florida's already seen that act. Where does it lead? It leads to another disappointing season. So I think the situation in Arkansas, when you talk about hot seat coaches, is kind of interesting. I think of Sam Pittman as sort of already retired. And maybe that's the wrong assessment, but that's just kind of like, I don't think he's going to be, no, I don't think anybody thinks he's going to suddenly turn it around in Arkansas where Arkansas becomes a playoff contender. But on the other hand, he's really likable. He improved over what? Gosh, I've almost forgotten that guy's name.
Chad Morris. Means that's a sign that Sam Pittman did his job. If you've almost forgotten Chad Morris.
Yeah. Well, he made people forget Chad Morris. Yeah, he's back teaching high school math somewhere. But yeah, I just think with Pittman, it's almost I could just see him at the end of the season say, "Well, I'm riding off in the sunset, guys." And everybody's kind of happy about it. So there's no real animosity. I don't see Arkansas fans chanting "Fire Sam." I just don't see that.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, anyways.
No, it's kind of like Sack Sam. Yeah, Sink Sam.
And we should point out, as we always do, John. I mean, we both think the world of Billy Napier. I mean, he seems like an upstanding guy, but he's upstanding guys and failed coaches. They walk away with buyout checks, not championships. I mean, those are the tenets of a guy who walks away with buyout check. Is you're an upstanding guy and you couldn't beat South Florida. Here's a buyout check.
Even though you're one of the stars of the USA Today network, I mean, if
I didn't know there was an honor roll list, but thanks.
Well, you're on my list. Even if that were the case and suddenly things took a bad turn on a wrong-headed column and they said, we need to get rid of this Toppmeyer guy, what kind of buyout do you think you're getting?
I don't think I'm guaranteed any.
You can't. See, I can play age discrimination card. You can't play that.
I'm not young enough nor old enough. I'm in that sweet spot. You're sort of laying out the case to fire me, John, as Billy Napier was laying out a synopsis for why he should be fired. after the South Florida game. And some of the comments, John, were almost like I couldn't have written them better. Billy Napier said, quote, "Not good enough." He said that he's responsible for the shortcomings. And when asked about, you really can't make this up, John. I'm struggling to get through us. When asked about the team's undisciplined play, Napier said, quote, he said, quote, "I think it's coaching." End quote. I mean, again, it's like that was written by a sports columnist. When asked about the undisciplined play, he said, quote, "I think it's coaching."
I can imagine an agent jumping out the window after reading that.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, you're right. But see, I love it. You brought up a South Florida player's appraisal of the outcome. I love it when players after a game inadvertently taunt the competition. It wasn't as though he was trying to tear down Billy Napier's kingdom, fragile as it might be. He
probably doesn't even know who the coach is there.
Yeah, it wasn't malicious, certainly. It wasn't like, man, they need to fire that dude. I bet you're right. I bet if somebody asked Florida players, South Florida players, who's the coach of the Gators? They'd be, I don't know. I mean,
he's that gentleman with the perplexed look on his face.
Well, it's not Spurrier anymore. It's not Steve Spurrier, not Urban Meyer.
No, and it's not even Dan Mullen or Jim McElwain or Will Muschamp.
Will Muschamp.
Yeah, well, we'll get on to potential replacement candidates probably in a upcoming edition of the pod, John. But other topics I want to get to. Big weekend for the SEC. You know, it's interesting. The critics, which we are sometimes, will throw a punch at the SEC when it deemed necessary. But aside from the Florida result, it was a great weekend for the conference. Oklahoma was, I thought, pretty dominant in sending Michigan home a loser. They seem to have rectified some of their 2024 shortcomings. John Mateer, I mean, that guy, he's never seen a throw he doesn't think he could make. There were a few times it's like, I don't know if he should be throwing that. And sometimes they mercifully fell to the turf. Other times they found their connection. It's like, I don't know how he saw that target and thought he could make that pass. So Oklahoma, they held up. Mississippi State delivered one of the more notable results of the weekend when it sent Arizona State home a loser and continued just what became a disastrous day, really, for the Big 12. I mean, overall, I think as compared to last season, John, this has been a much better run of performance for the SEC in non-conference play as you compare it to a year ago.
Yeah, there's I thought the Auburn win over Baylor was significant, and that's a game, the way things opened up last year, that the SEC would have lost.
Yeah.
And I mean, the LSU win over Clemson was huge. That's the kind of win that resonates throughout the season. And I thought that what Mississippi State now has to do is hope that Arizona State gets its act together quickly. It has a lot of returners, a lot of starters returning from a playoff team last year, but certainly doesn't seem to have the same spark. Misses running back Cam Scatterby, who seemed to be the driving force behind that team. But if Arizona State comes on like gangbusters and has a good year, that win looks better for the SEC, for Mississippi State and the whole SEC. This 12-team playoff really creates a lot of strange allies. You want to pull for win or lose to a team. You wish it the best afterward because that shows up on your strength of schedule.
Whether or not was the Oklahoma, I mean the Mississippi State triumph, that was I don't think it counts as shocking, but
no.
Very, very notable. But I wonder your thoughts on Oklahoma too, John, because I was there and I thought the defense played to its billing. I thought Oklahoma would have a really good defense this year, but I was curious about the offense. You know, John Mateer came to Oklahoma with great credentials from his time at Washington State, but in his 2 games last season against Power 4 competition, he struggled with his completion rate. Those were not. He had some good running stats in those games, but as a thrower, he struggled in his 2 games last year against Power 4 opponents. So that to me was like the one question. I didn't doubt that he had talent. I knew he did. And I mean, you're like an expert on Washington State football, so I trusted your assessment of him, but I did need to see it against big league defenses. Now, this wasn't an SEC opponent, but Michigan for the last several years now has had whatever might be going on the offensive side of the ball for Michigan. For the last several years, they've had one of the best defenses in the country, and I think they'll have another good defense this year. And I thought Napier was really impressive. Again, he forced a few throws that could have been a little more disastrous than they were, but I mean, he gave them a spark that they did not have last year. You have Deion Burks healthy. You have overall a better wide receiver room. The offensive line, I didn't think they were dominant, but I thought they held up better than they would have last year. And we heard throughout the preseason, like Oklahoma was sort of a sleeper playoff team. You said too much schedule for Oklahoma for you to go there, but I'm wondering if you're reevaluating that now that they have the win against Michigan on the resume.
First off, I think John Napier potentially is the most entertaining SEC player since Johnny Manziel. He can do some of the same things. He's an extremely strong, underrated runner in the sense that his leg drive, he gets extra yards on contact. He's also elusive, and he's got those improvisational qualities to play breaks down, and the defense might still be in dire straits because he can. And he will make some risky throws, but that's part of his appeal. He never gives up on a play. From an context of Oklahoma, reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield. Just a guy that I want him to have his hands on the ball in the clutch with the game on the line. I know it's going to face tougher teams in Michigan the rest of the way, but I really like Oklahoma. I still think its schedule is impossible.
My point on that would be, though, John, is there enough schedule there that Oklahoma could win a few of those games, lose a few of those games, and build a 9-3 resume? I mean, we almost had a 9-3 team in the playoff last year, and I think if Oklahoma could get to 9-3, it could have a better 9-3 resume than any of those bubble teams had at 9-3 last year.
I think I'm right on this. I was looking at the schedule, and all 8 of its SEC opponents are currently ranked in one of the 2 top 25 polls. Now,
yeah, I think that's right.
Okay, well, if you go, I just don't see how that's doable. I think.
But what if they go 5-3?
If they go 9-3, yeah, they're definitely should be in the playoff with that schedule. I see it. I think 8-4 should be about as much as you could ask. One of the problems I see with Oklahoma, excuse me, that was apparent. It's been apparent in the first 2 games. Napier has such a heavy load to carry.
Yeah,
I think he carried the ball. He carried the ball 19 times Saturday against Michigan, and his teammates, the rest of his team, carried it 21. That's too much of a burden to put on one guy, one quarterback. You look at teams that they want to be 3 deep in running backs and rotate guys. Most teams do. A lot of them, at least 2. But Oklahoma's kind of handed the ground game over to Napier and says, make what you will of it. I just don't think he rushed for over 800 yards and passed for over 3,000 at Washington State last year. I mean, heavy, heavy load. But that was with Washington State schedule. I just don't think you can do that in the SEC. I think the key for Oklahoma is building a running game. The offensive line gets better as the season goes along. Jay Knott, the Cal transfer running back, becomes a big factor, and they can run the ball. I do like Oklahoma's defense. And that to me points to a difference between Brent Venables and Billy Napier. If somebody says, well, what's good about a Billy Napier team? You get a blank look. If you ask what's good about a Brent Venables team, you can point to his defense. He's a defensive tactician. He's proved that with national championship teams as a coordinator at Clemson. And I think he did a really nice job against. That's the main reason I thought Oklahoma would win the game. A freshman quarterback, albeit a one as talented as Bryce Underwood, is going to see things he hasn't seen before with a Brent Venables defense. He knows how to exploit an inexperienced quarterback. And so I
you're
think
right. Underwood was out of his depth trying to solve that
yes.
Oklahoma defense. You're right.
Yeah, as Arch Manning was a week earlier. You were there for that against Ohio State and Matt Patricia. He looked bewildered for much of that game.
Well, and great segue, John. I should make you the host of this podcast because I want to touch on Arch Manning. I wrote a column about this Sunday, and I know that the stats looked great against San Jose State. I don't care about the stats really. I watched that game, and I thought Arch made some good throws. I also thought there were some concerning throws as well. Particularly, he had an open Ryan Wingo on one pass that's been heavily scrutinized. I'm sure you've seen the highlight, John, or maybe saw it live. Arch Manning grimaced as he threw it, and it was a bad pass, threw it to the feet of Ryan Wingo. And it's not the first time, it's not the only time, it's not the only throw we've seen from Arch Manning where it's made me wonder, is he 100%? Or if he is this guy an average quarterback, maybe a bit above average quarterback? I know that's hard to even fathom because of the last name on the jersey. But again, I know the stats were great, but as I watched him against San Jose State, I was thinking, this guy doesn't stink. No, Arch Manning doesn't stink. But the idea that he's the second coming of Tim Tebow meets Joe Burrow, I don't know. I thought to me looked like an average to above average quarterback. Your thoughts on his week 2 performance?
Yeah, I really liked your column on that because as columnists, we tend to traffic in hyperbole. A guy's a boom or a guy's a bust. Mm-hmm. There's little room in between. That's a much easier column to write. And I kind of agree right now. When I look around the SEC, a very talent-rich league in quarterbacks with a lot of guys that can beat you running or throwing. When I look around the league and I think, who would I rather have? Arch Manning at quarterback, or say Garrett Nussmeier, or even
John Mateer?
John Mateer, certainly. I mean, who game on the line, third down play, 3rd and 8, who's going to make a play? He doesn't come to mind right now. And maybe
I cut you off there, John, but you were about ready to say Bo Pribula of Missouri. Yeah. And I think, if it's 3rd and 6, I might want Bo Pribula taking the snap there at this point.
As far as overreacting, watching Bo Pribula, a former Penn State backup, if I were at Penn State, I think I might rather have him at quarterback.
Yeah, Penn State very uninspiring in a win against Florida International.
Yeah, Drew Aller, he doesn't really move the needle with me. I know he's a pro prospect and all that good stuff, but man, Pribula was he makes plays. He's accurate, and boy, can he run. Another quarterback worth mentioning, I know we're off topic a little bit here, but I've kind of been on this, I've been thinking about maybe it's time to jump off the Jackson Arnold bandwagon. I've sort of been clinging to the back of it, but he was 24 out of 28 passing against a overmatched opponent. Nonetheless, we know he can run. I thought that was a really good sign for Auburn and Hugh Freeze.
You are driving that Jackson Arnold bandwagon, I got to say, John. I don't know if there's anybody else on board there. I think a few people have climbed back in. It might have been empty
maybe
at some point last year, but you've attracted a few people in the back seat, at least. Yeah, but getting back to Arch, John, it was interesting in Sarkisian's Monday press conference. He was asked about the possibility of whether Arch Manning is injured, and again, in the file this one under like reality's stranger than fiction, Sarkisian answered the question by referencing what people's faces look like when they use the bathroom, which I'm not sure how that has anything to do with what Arch Manning was doing, grimacing when he was throwing the pass. I mean, he could have like shot down unflinchingly that Arch Manning has a shoulder injury, or pounded his fist on the table and say, no, this guy's not injured. Instead, Steve Sarkisian pivoted the conversation into what people look like whenever they use the bathroom. I'm not sure what that has to do with price of tea in China. But what did you think of that response? I'm not sure if you've seen it, that the back and forth there about whether Manning's injured or not, and Sarkisian sort of trying to dance around the question with some humor and what might or might not be going on there with Arch Manning's health. To clarify, John and I would never pretend to be doctors.
I don't know. I've doled out some medical
okay.
advice.
Well, I guess
before.
I shouldn't speak for you.
Yeah. You shouldn't speak for me. Yeah, I helped somebody just the other day. Well, I say I helped them. Maybe I did. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to it. If things go south, I mean, I am not a doctor, but I've got some experience and background.
Play one
knowledge.
on a podcast. Hey, have you ever speculated what people look like when they're doing their business in the bathroom?
No, I stay away from bathroom topics. Yeah,
but Steve Sarkisian does not. No, does Arch Manning look injured to you, John? Since you've put yourself as a medical expert.
No, I never thought of that. I mean, I guess I could go back and look at video of his throwing the ball last year when he played as a backup to Quinn Ewers.
And he just doesn't have the zip I expected him to have on some of these throws. I mean, he made some beautiful tosses against San Jose State, and the man can really throw a wheel route 2 weeks in a row now. He's had beautiful completions on a wheel route, which is not an easy throw to make, but there's been other times where he's needed to let one rip, and maybe now we're getting back into that bathroom thing, but he's needed to let one rip, and he hasn't had that zip that I thought he'd have.
No, I agree. I think it speaks to the overall situation with him. I don't think there have been any players scrutinized as much as he has been. So it's almost as though he's not playing like a Heisman Trophy winner or even candidate. So there must be something wrong.
That's a great point. We go looking for problems sometimes when maybe it's as I wrote Sunday. This guy's not a Heisman frontrunner. He's not a stinky quarterback. He's just average to above average. Maybe he gets better, but at this point, I think what we have on our hands here is an average to a little bit above average quarterback.
Yeah, and it helps that I still think I'm not downplaying Texas's talent. I still think it's a good team, and it's got a more favorable schedule than some other playoff contenders in the SEC. So I'm not writing off Texas. I think Texas's strength is defense.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't dazzled by Texas's offensive line. Just dominating. Kind of expected to dominate at the line of scrimmage. I often look at offensive lines when I want to determine if a team is really ready to play, particularly against an inferior opponent. How that offensive line comes off the ball. Is that a surefire way of judging a team? No, but it's kind of like doling out medical advice. You can throw it out there.
Spinning forward to this week, John, and we'll make our picks here in a moment for whatever that's worth. John and I each had a bad week in the picks department last week.
Sad to hear. Yeah.
As Billy Napier would say, that's an opportunity. But before we get to our picks,
sometimes you're just not good enough.
You're just not good enough, and coaching is the problem. But before we get to our picks, John, a couple of notable matchups on the schedule this weekend, including Vanderbilt, South Carolina. Oh, no, that's not what you were expecting to say. But seriously, John, I think Vanderbilt, South Carolina is pretty notable. I mean, they have a common opponent, Virginia Tech, and Vanderbilt won more convincingly than South Carolina did. But as I try to detour here, the two marquee games this weekend are Georgia at Tennessee and Texas A&M, team that you perpetually love, at Notre Dame, with a chance to just land a real haymaker on the Irish, send them to 0-2. Which of those two underdogs? Vegas has Tennessee as a 3.5-point home underdog to Georgia, and they have Texas A&M as a 6.5-point road underdog at Notre Dame. I'm not asking you to pick against the spread, but just in general, which of those underdogs do you give a better chance to on Saturday, Tennessee or Texas A&M?
Well, in the past, my answer would have been Texas A&M, certainly, but I'm a self-proclaimed Aggie addict, and I've recently gone through a 12-step rehab program.
No.
So I'll say Tennessee is a better bet.
Even with the vulnerabilities Notre Dame showed at Miami.
Yeah, because maybe I'm overcorrecting here. Yeah, I could be guilty of that. Because to me, Texas A&M looks like a more complete team in some ways. But Notre Dame at home and the Aggies' history, I just can't shake that game last year. I thought it was all set up for Texas A&M to really register a huge win.
You got to get over that one, John. They're playing a different quarterback at A&M now, and I think your point was they should have been playing a different quarterback in the second half of the game, but things have changed. They
I
have
would have
moved on to
jerked that. I
Marcel
would
Reed.
have jerked. Yeah, I would have jerked Connor Wigman after the first series. When the ball starts bouncing to receivers, I'm out of there. So yeah, but I just, if I'm going to be wrong, I'm not going to be wrong the same way. Okay.
What about Josh Heupel's opportunity here? Because it's interesting to me. The accomplishments haven't stopped coming for Heupel in the years since he beat Nick Saban in 2022. That monumental moment for Josh Heupel and Tennessee's program, sort of signaling the uprising of Tennessee. But that didn't mark the end of the accomplishments, and Tennessee made the playoff last year. However, and you can speak to this, John, in Knoxville, but even for me from afar, it still seems like if you ask a Tennessee fan, like, what's the top line on Josh Heupel's resume? What's a defining moment? I think they still look back to that win over Nick Saban in 2022, which was a huge moment. The goalpost came down, just this epic college football scene. But here is now an opportunity to show for Josh Heupel that, like, hey, Tennessee's past Alabama. They've left Alabama in the dust. To beat Kirby Smart, I think would be like this new signature moment for Josh Heupel. And he could say, hey, yeah, I beat Nick Saban 3 years ago, but you can stop talking about that now because he's beat Kirby Smart. For me, this is a massive opportunity for Josh Heupel. I don't know that he gets it done, but it's a chance to sort of leave 2022 fully in the rearview mirror at this point if he were to beat Georgia.
Yeah, and it's not as though he really has a lot to lose in this game. Even if Georgia wins, Tennessee has a very accommodating schedule, still a playoff contender. Uh, Going back to that Alabama game, the thing that was so noteworthy about that, he wasn't just beating Alabama, he was beating Nick Saban and making Nick Saban's defense look totally inadequate. Just roaring up and down the field. Jalen Hyatt, 5 touchdown catches against the secondary with a few future NFL players. It was just really the worst of looks for a Nick Saban defense. Couldn't come close to stopping Heupel's offense. Now Heupel's not just winning with offense. So in a way, this is a statement game for the program. He's not just some offensive guru, hotshot offensive coach. He can build a program. I think that's what a win over Georgia would prove. He's already been a streak terminator. He ended a losing streak for Tennessee against Alabama, against Florida. He's 2-2 against those programs. Hadn't been able to beat Georgia, 8 straight losses. But this is Georgia's, I think, in the last 9 years, its least talented team, a less talented Georgia team. And I don't know if Gunnar Stockton's good enough against a quarterback. But one thing always to remember about Kirby Smart's team, you can watch Georgia play against a know-nothing opponent and say, man, the Dogs don't look that good. No, they look different in a big game under Kirby Smart. So I think Tennessee would get Georgia's best shot.
Totally agree, which brings us to our picks, John. We don't have to pick that game if we don't want to, but it's out there on the table to set the stage. I was 2-3 last week, 5-5 for the season. You were 1-4, came oh so close to Texas Tech, covering a 48.5 point spread against Kent State, only won by 48. So you dropped that one. You went 1-4. You're 3-7, but the season's young. Nobody's going to hand you a buyout check if it keeps going further south. So I suggest you just improve your record. And as our listeners know, but just a reminder, John and I this year are doing a 5-pack of picks. We can pick whoever we want, as long as 4 of the 5 games involve at least one SEC team. So see this as a 5-game parlay, if you will, but proceed cautiously with the knowledge that I'm 5-5 for the season and John is 3-7. All right, I'll go first this week. John, here's my 5-pack of picks. First, my SEC picks. I'm taking Oklahoma, giving up. They're a 24.5 point favorite. I will take Oklahoma to cover that 24.5 point spread at Temple. Can't get over what I saw in Norman last week. Was very impressed by the Sooners. So I'll take Oklahoma and cover the 24.5 at Temple. I'm taking Missouri as a 27.5 point favorite at home against Louisiana Lafayette, Billy Napier's former school, perhaps his future school. Really impressed, like you are, by Bo Perbula and Missouri's offense. So I think Missouri can cover the 27.5. I'm falling into your trap, John, and taking Texas A&M at Notre Dame. I don't know if the Aggies will win, but Notre Dame's 6.5 point favorite. I think that could be a low-scoring game, so I will take the Aggies as the underdog in the 6.5 points. Speaking of taking the road team and the points, I'm taking Vanderbilt as a 5.5 point underdog. Give me those 5.5 points at South Carolina. And finally, my lock of the week, John, Oregon, after beating Mike Gundy by 200 points, will now be at Northwestern on Saturday. Only a 27.5 point favorite. I say only because when Dan Lanning's Ducks face an overmatched opponent, they can really lay it on. So I will take Oregon to cover the 27.5 point spread.
Yeah, I want to say this up front about my picks this week. I don't feel very good about any of them. And looking back, I felt pretty good about my picks the first 2 weeks, and I wound up 3-7. So maybe that really means nothing. I'm going to take LSU versus Florida.
LSU 9.5 point favorite.
Mm-hmm.
You're fine with that? Okay.
Yeah.
LSU will cover at home. Sure.
Uh-huh. I'm going to take Arkansas against Ole Miss.
Arkansas is getting 9.5 points as the road underdog. Ole Miss let you down last week, John. Lane Kiffin afterwards apologized to all the gamblers. They won the game at Kentucky, but they didn't cover the spread. So you're taking your revenge. You're taking Arkansas the 9.5 points, huh?
Yeah, that's an angry man pick.
Okay. That apology from Lane Kiffin wasn't enough for you?
Now, then I'm going to take Alabama giving the points against Wisconsin.
20.5 point favorite Alabama. You think they're getting off the mat here, and we'll cover that, or you just don't think much of Wisconsin?
I really think Alabama still has something to prove. Obviously, after that Florida State game, one game doesn't do it, and so I think that will. I was impressed with Ty Simpson, albeit against a weak opponent last week, throwing the ball. So I'll give the points there. Then the other pick. I'm going with Vanderbilt, like you, taking 5.5 points. I thought South Carolina was overrated going into the season. I still think it's overrated, so I'll go with the Commodores.
Look at our 180 on Vanderbilt, John. This used to be a home or mockery of the Doors, and here we are both picking Vanderbilt, taking those points. Is it really just Diego Pavia? I mean, it just turned the narrative of this podcast, and here we are heaping praise upon Vanderbilt, picking them as a road underdog.
I don't think it's just Diego Pavia. I think we try to be flexible
That's
in
true.
our judgmental calls.
We'll jump on and off a bandwagon.
Yes, exactly. Clark Lee, I thought, was a total joke at one point. and now look at me. I'm picking him to beat Beamer Ball in Columbia, a hostile venue.
How many family members will Beamer be shaking hands with and kissing babies if he wins this game?
If you
You're
win,
you're sort of the expert on Beamer's post game
yeah,
celebrations, John.
I'll go over and under. I'll set the over and under at 8 on that.
Okay, all right.
Got
Love seeing
my
those guys celebrate with their families. By the way, it really shows that this is a family affair.
family comes first with most of those coaches, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. My lock of the week. Yes, I got stung. I don't get one game will not deter me from picking against Kent State.
I never expected it would.
No, in fact, I was having this conversation with our new subscriber, Cody from the Kentucky Fan. He checked out the Buffalo spread against Kent State.
Buffalo 21.5 point favorite.
He was kind
Kent
of like,
State's a home. You don't want to go into Kent, Ohio. Try to beat their Flashes, right?
Whatever they call themselves. Yeah. I watched that. I watched a lot of that Texas Tech game, more than I should have. It was 48-0 at halftime. And they just kind of fiddled around.
Never got you.
Yeah, I think Texas Tech was on pace to score 90-something and just said, well, it might hurt ourselves in the poll if we run up too big a score. Let's consider public opinion here and pull back somewhat. I don't know much about Buffalo. I watched a little of its season opener, but I know a lot about Kent State. I'm convinced it's a worse team in college football, worst program. And so I'll give the points.
Buffalo got to cover the 21.5. That game, is that, it's on CBS Sports Network, John. Couple big games on some obscure channels this week. The CW is hosting a top 20 clash. Probably never thought that was going to happen. South Florida at Miami is on the CW, but you will be tuned in to Buffalo at Kent State on CBS Sports Network, I'm sure.
I think Buffalo is going to pose real serious problems for Kent State's offense.
I bet you do. Good luck to improving your record, John. I'll see if I can scrounge up some buyout dollars if it doesn't go any better for you.
You got anybody? You got a potential backup you can bring here? Well, you can't really do that because of my age discrimination possibilities in the illegal.
Maybe I can find somebody older than you.
Good luck.
Bill Belichick available?
No. Good luck with that if you think you can find somebody older that can be semi-coherent on the podcast.
I'll start working on a hot board, John, and I got a feeling we're going to have hot boards flying around here on the podcast soon. Won't be the last we talk about the hot seat. I'm sure of that. Thanks for stopping by this week. Enjoy the week 3 action. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.